So after conference championship week in college football, we now know who are the four teams that have made it into the first ever college football playoff. And I'm sure the major networks that have been involved with this, like ESPN, like Fox, the NCAA themselves, the College Football Playoff Selection Committee, just are in love with themselves and infatuated with themselves and slobbering all over themselves about how they finally feel like they've got it right. There's finally a college football playoff to determine one true national champion. But again, to me, it just seems like the NCAA and some of the entities involved with the NCAA that love defending the NCAA to no end seem to not be able to help themselves. It's like the obvious solution is staring them right in the freaking face, and they just can't help but do something that pisses off a lot of people. It's like the NCAA literally sets out to intentionally piss off people. It's like they feel that um, that's a good business model. Is let's stir up controversy and let's intentionally piss people off and let's leave people out of the party and da da da. And I just don't get it. The same organization that has March Madness, that includes now 68 teams to determine one true national champion, and gets it right on the college basketball side on so many different levels, still so drastically gets it wrong when it comes to college football. I just don't get it. And you look at the teams that actually made it to the playoff. I don't have any qualms with any of these four teams being in the playoffs. I really don't. Alabama, champion of the SEC, one-loss team. They're in, fine. Oregon, champion of the Pac-12, one-loss team, deserved to be in, winner of a power major conference. Florida State, who need I remind people, is still the defending national champions, and they're the only undefeated team in this football playoff. They deserve to be in there, and I can make an argument, even when you want to talk about style of victory and this and that they should be the number one seed. They are the defending national champion. They've made the playoff. Until proven otherwise, they're still the champions. And then you throw in Ohio State, a one-loss champion from the Big Ten, who won in incredibly impressive fashion over Wisconsin in the Big Ten championship game. I have no qualms with any of these four teams involved. You know, I do agree that, any of these four teams, you'd say in theory, even though I don't fully believe it, has a chance to win the national championship. But I do agree with the notion that you can't determine a true national champion without having these teams involved. They all deserve to be there. But then I look at the fact that in the Big 12, you have a one-loss TCU team and you have a one-loss Baylor team. And nobody from that conference is represented. You basically have 5 power conferences, but you have a situation, a scenario, where at the end of the day, at least one of these conferences is not going to be represented every year, consistently. How stupid is that? Furthermore, if there was ever a year where the SEC had 2 teams that the committee just was in love with and couldn't keep out, you could be looking at leaving 2 of those 5 power conferences out. How are you determining any type of true national champion by leaving a one-loss TCU and a one-loss Baylor team out of the mix? It just makes no fucking sense. I've been a proponent for a long time of an 18 playoff. That gives you 5 power conferences, each with their conference champion getting an automatic berth. Even if that means that an Alabama lost to Missouri somehow in the SEC championship game and Missouri got that automatic berth. They're the conference champion. They did what they needed to do. That means to me they deserve a shot to play for the national championship. Some may disagree, but fuck off. And then you have the 3 at-larges. So if you did that in this case, and you had those 3 at-larges, along with the 5 conference champions, let's say you had Alabama, Oregon, Florida State, Ohio State, and then maybe you want to give it to TCU, and even in this case, Baylor being co-Big 12 champions, because that conference was too stupid to where they couldn't actually have a Big 12 championship game. So there's 6, and then you want to throw in somebody maybe like a Michigan State, and maybe you wanted to throw in somebody like a Mississippi State. That's fine. There's 8. Okay, I don't think you need to run much deeper than that, but I think out of those 8 teams, I think those 8 teams belong in the mix, perhaps, and you could determine one true national champion off of that, and you could do enough to make people happy. I don't think in college football we need to have a 16 or 32 team playoff. I don't think we need to do that. Because I think in college football, once you get the 8, maybe 10 teams at most, out of those is where you would actually determine the national champion, and there's such a clear departure down the board between, let's say number 8 and number 18 that there's just no sense. But here again, you've got the NFL. They get 12 teams out of 32 into their playoffs. You've got the NBA that puts 16 teams in the playoffs. The NHL that puts 16 teams in the playoffs. For Christ's sakes, Major League Baseball, one of the most outdated, archaically run, out-of-touch organizations in professional sports in the world, manages to get 10 of their 30 teams in the playoffs. You following a trend here? Most of these leagues, it's a third to half of their teams make it to the postseason. Yet in college football, with 100 and I think it's 28 teams at that old traditional Division I level, if you will, you get 4 of them make the fucking playoff. You're not even getting 10%. For Christ's sakes, you're not even getting 5%. And all the while, what you get here is you get TCU and Baylor totally left hung out to dry. We could talk about the lack of a Big 12 title game and how idiotic that is and but there's just no reason. Could we at least not compromise in this particular case and say instead of having a 4 team or instead of you think 8 teams is too much, that's 6? Okay, then have 6. Then in my opinion, you have those 6. You could say Alabama gets a bye. And Florida State, in my opinion, being the defending national champion and the only undefeated team in the playoff, they deserve to get the other bye. In my position, that would leave Oregon to maybe face a TCU, a 3-6 matchup, and then Ohio State, Baylor, 4-5. Doesn't that sound like it's such a better alternative? Doesn't that sound like so much of a better option? You're rewarding those top 2 teams by giving them a bye. You're getting 2 more teams involved. And I think you're doing everything you can to make sure you are doing the best job possible at the vetting process of finding a true national champion. This isn't rocket science. But it seems like it is for the NCAA. But like I said, it seems like they intentionally want to piss people off. Now, I don't know about the whole crap of what Art Briles is saying is that there's not enough Southerners involved, in the whole process. So that's kind of stupid. And, people like Condoleezza Rice as part of the college football playoff selection committee, that seems kind of ridiculous too. But Briles saying stuff like that is completely ridiculous. I was born in Illinois. But I know that a team like Baylor and TCU both deserve a shot at the national championship because the playoffs should be more than 4 teams. My biggest problem with these coaches that are now getting their panties in a bunch and getting pissed off about this is at the end of the day, your programs, your fucking schools, your athletic directors, your school presidents, whatever the case, they agreed to this shit. Don't get mad now because it didn't work out to your favor. Don't get mad now because of the system that you voted in place, that your schools helped put in place, has now fucked you over. As far as I'm concerned, if you were stupid enough to vote for the 4-team playoff, and you were like a TCU or a Baylor, then you deserve exactly what the fuck you get. If you weren't smart enough to see that a 4-team playoff was only half of the solution and therefore no real solution at all, then you fucking deserve to get left out in the cold. With that said, though, I hope at some point in time the NCAA realizes finally just how stupid they are and just how wrong they are when it comes to college football, and that they expand it. Even if they only give me 6 teams. And like I said, in this case, 6 teams this year would be perfect. It would be all you would need. And yet we know damn good and well the NCAA doesn't want to do perfect when it comes to college football. They want to have an imperfect, half-assed way of determining a national champion. This has been the way of thinking since time itself. And I just don't get it, man. I hope at least in some ways that this first ever college football playoff is at least entertaining. But then on the flip side, I kind of hope that it's a disaster. I hope that it leads to a bunch of non-competitive games and people will be like, well, what if TCU or Baylor were in there? What did that? And I hope it just gets people talking about it and not talking about it in a good way. That's my hope, anyways. Because this college football playoff is still stupid.